Angus, and it's great to be here with Francois. We are the editors of the journal, and we've been doing this now for about 2 years, and we really enjoy it. We really enjoy the process of helping people publish their research, publish their findings from their professional work in environmental impact assessment, all forms of impact assessment. So we always enjoy this session, and we don't want to talk very much, or rather we want to talk in relation to what you would like us to help you with or talk about. But we do appreciate the chance to meet with you, and so you have a face to a name, you know who we are, and so that you feel comfortable in sending us your papers or your ideas for papers, and we can help with the publication process. I do have some, I guess I'd have three key points that I would like to make on behalf of Francois and myself about what we look for in a paper that we receive. And I guess these 3 points relate to the most frequent comments and feedback and issues that our reviewers raise. So I guess just before I go into those 3 points, I should say to you, so you all know, when you submit us a paper, and at the moment you do that by sending us an email, we remove your name from the paper and we send it out to 2 or 3 independent reviewers. So that's part of our job as editors. We find professional people or academics in the field that your paper is about, and we ask them to review the submission, and they don't know who you are, and that's deliberate. We give them a number of criteria to look for, and those criteria are the same points you'll see if you look at the guide to submitting a paper, which is usually published in the journal, and it's also on the journal web pages. So those reviewers, after a few weeks, we try and make them respond as quickly as possible, but they're busy professional people, it sometimes takes longer. They send their reports back to us, and we then send their reports to you, but we make sure that the reviewer's name is removed. So it's a double-blind review process. And when we send the reviewer comments back to you, we also give our advice as editors, and that advice is whether we are going to accept your paper for publication, and if so, under what terms. It's a bit like an impact assessment approval. We're giving an approval but with conditions attached, and the conditions usually are, in most cases, nearly all cases, there is some revision or reworking of the paper required to improve it in some way. Reviewers are there to help improve the quality of your papers. So then, when we get your paper back with the changes made, we ask you to tell us how you address the reviewer's comments, and if it's all good, then we send the paper off to our publisher and they publish. And as of the beginning of this year, we publish electronically almost immediately. Once a paper is finished with the process that Francois and I coordinate, we are able to publish your paper online within a matter of a week or 2. It depends how long the publisher takes. And then further down the line, the actual hard copy will get printed. Now, at the moment, we're about 4 or 5 months ahead. So at the moment, we've got papers right through to the end of December 2011 already accounted for. So, but you do get electronic publication almost immediately. So that's the general process, and of course Francois and I will take questions about that. But I just wanted to talk about the 3 points that we most often receive from our reviewers when they comment on a paper that we sent out for review. The 3 things are, the first one is, does the paper have a clear structure? The challenge is, everybody who sends us a paper is a passionate impact assessment professional who has a fantastic story to tell. You have lots of information, lots of wisdom, lots of experience, and you've got to somehow put that into words in a succinct and short fashion that's going to convey that interest and passion and the lessons that you've learned in a way. So we encourage you to be creative, but we often find that the structure of written work can be improved. What the sort of thing we're looking for is a very easy to follow structure in a logical progression through the topics, and use of simple English so that your reader can easily follow, can follow the line of your arguments, the line of your thoughts. And I guess if I was singling out one thing about structure that's absolutely vital, and which Francois and I often flag with papers, is that the introduction must have a very clear purpose for the paper quite early in the paper. The reason for that is if you pick up a paper and scan it, the first thing you do is read the title. You might then look at the author and say, who's this by? You might scan the abstract, and we'll talk about abstracts separately. But if you start skimming the paper, you probably want to know, what was the purpose? Why did they do this? It sounds interesting. I've read the title. It sounds interesting. So what was it about? So what we're looking for is something that gives a sense of why this paper is so interesting and what it's about early in the paper. So that's what I wanted to say about structure. The second point I want to make is it's essential you have a legitimate method or methodology. Probably this is the single greatest area where authors are asked to rework their paper. Probably the biggest issue is that the basis for your analysis or for the story that you're telling in your paper has not been explained properly. In other words, the method has not been explained properly. It's particularly good if you can reference a previous body of work or a methodological publication. There's lots of books about research methods and so on. It's particularly good if your method is drawn from a previous example in some way, and you can demonstrate that. In other words, if you can demonstrate that your method is based upon a legitimate method that's been published and talked about before, you have more chance of having success. This is not to say that you can't come up with something new, but when you come up with something new, usually you are adapting something old. So you reference the old and then you say how you've adapted that so it becomes the new, and you explain that clearly to your reader. In our journal, we have two types of paper. We have what we call a full paper, and they're usually 7,000 words, and we have what we call a professional practice paper, and they're usually up to a maximum of 4,000 words. With the full paper, the expectation for a rigorous methodology is probably fair to say it's a bit higher. There's a bit more of an academic expectation in terms of thorough engagement with research methods or similar kinds of published material. For a professional practice paper, we love professional practice papers, and we love the fact that IAIA includes government regulators and consultants and proponents, and we like to hear their stories. And we know that those people don't know all the academic literature in the way that academics do. But nevertheless, you still have to explain how you did your study, whatever it was. Maybe you interviewed some people. Maybe you had an interesting case study. You had a particular industrial project that you worked on as a consultant, and it had some really interesting stories. You still had some method there. Even as a professional, telling the story of what you did in this assessment, there was a method, and we need to hear that method. It's quite okay for you to tell us your personal opinions, but you still need to explain that that is what you're doing. So that's the first 2 points, was clear structure, legitimate method. The third point is, and this is again one that Francois and I very frequently mention, is we ask you to have a message for an international audience. Now, I'm from Western Australia, population of 2 million. We have a great EIA system, Are you interested? If I write a paper that's all about EIA in Western Australia, and I call it EIA in Western Australia, are you going to read that paper? No. Why would you? Why are you interested in Western Australia? Now, I'm not going to get sad about that because I'm from Western Australia and I publish a lot. But, so what is it about impact assessment in Western Australia that's interesting to someone from Africa or from North America or from Europe or from South America, from Asia? What is it? What is the message? So, there's nothing wrong with a paper about EIA in Western Australia or EIA in Barbados or Mexico or wherever. But there must be some message, some lessons learned, some common themes, some interesting ideas that you know other practitioners in other parts of the world will be interested in. So maybe you're a government regulator, and you're a government regulator in Western Australia, but you know that the government regulators in South Africa or the government regulators in France will be interested in the story that you have to tell. So tell that story and address it. Address your story to those people. Talk to government regulators. Don't call the paper EIA in Western Australia. Call the paper something like Effective Government Regulations for Impact Assessment, a case study from Western Australia. Do you see the difference there? The focus is on talking about government regulation and how that might be interesting, rather than Western Australia, we have impact assessment. So we find that very common, that most people are very, very involved in what they're doing, and they forget that IAPA is an international journal. We send this journal to all our members. We have members in 110 countries at the moment. 110 different cultures, different ways of doing impact assessment. And the regulators, the consultants, the academics from 110 countries, that's your audience. So what have you got to say to those people? If I'm in Western Australia, what do I want to say to an academic in Mexico? That's my audience. And I need to think about that, and every other country too. So I think I'll stop there. They're my 3 points. Clear structure, legitimate method, message for an international audience.